ANDIZI, meaning I will not come down. A stubborn focus on building a great life. Written and read by Beauty Kotela. Part 1, Before the Building Starts. For those who know anything about building, you would know that there are critical pre-building processes involved. The main step in this process is the actual building plan. You do not start putting up any structure without a clear plan of what the structure must look like, what materials are required, and how those materials would be obtained. In that plan, you also consider the function or the purpose of your structure and the environment in which it is being built, and incorporate those considerations in your building structure. This detailed plan is also necessary, if not more important, in the process of rebuilding. Even though there might have been a plan for the original structure before the building fell, rebuilding cannot simply start. A process of review and re-examination of the plan is critical. In addition, a process of examining the fallen parts of the structure, investigating the causes of the collapse, is critical in ensuring that when you rebuild, you have addressed those weaknesses in your structure. The same is required for the building projects of our lives. There must be a clear plan detailing the desired outcomes and the resources, material and human, required to bring it to reality. In addition, the process of rebuilding our life project requires a re-examination of the original plan as well as an investigation of the previous weaknesses so that you can mitigate against those weaknesses going forward. However, there is an aspect which for the most part gets ignored in the planning stages, the role of the enemy. The result is that at the first sign of opposition, many abandon their building projects because they never catered for the real possibility of one who will seek to either stop you from building, constantly interfere with your building projects, or even worse, seek to demolish your building projects. Another, even more important and yet also often ignored aspect in this stage is the acceptance of the fact that God has approved you. You have been cleared to start building and have therefore found favor with Him. He is on your side, helping you, inspiring you, and strengthening you to carry out this great project. But if you do not know this, when the enemy attacks, you will stop for good. Therefore, in this section, using the story of Nehemiah, we look at the planning stage. So, chapter 1, the walls have fallen. Growing up in the rural villages of the Eastern Cape province in the 1970s to the early 80s had its challenges, like poverty and a general lack of resources. But it also had its advantages. Our people find ways of making lemonade from the lemons that life gave us. In those days, almost all the households in my village had no television. Radio was the only source of news. So in our house, entertainment came from listening to the radio as well as listening to stories. My parents were great storytellers, but my favorite storytellers were my aunt Udabao and my uncle Udomnci. They had a way of telling the story that made you see very clearly in the theater of your mind what they were talking about. If the story had exciting aspects, you would feel the excitement. Similarly, if the story had scary parts, you would feel the fear. And so almost every evening in our home, the storyteller would say, "Kwathi kaloku ngantsomi," in English, once upon a time, and we would know it's story time. While entertainment was one of the purposes of storytelling, there was a bigger purpose. In all the stories, we were being given life lessons on how to act or react and lesson on how to treat others. Our parents used storytelling as another tool in molding our characters. As I grew up, I was introduced to the greatest storyteller that ever walked this earth, Jesus. All of us, whether believers or not, have come across the parables that he told. And most importantly, we have picked up a lesson or two from these parables. And that was the reason why he told them. Stories and or parables are an amazing education tool. You see, stories, whether fables or parables or true, they give the educator a canvas upon which to paint the truth, the facts, the information, and the lessons they wish to impart to the listener. And because the stories are fun to listen to and easy to remember, the associated message tend to also be easy to remember. Therefore, please allow me to tell you a story. Once upon a time, in a country called Persia, there was a Jewish man named Nehemiah. What makes this story attractive to me are all the experiences that Nehemiah goes through in the process of rebuilding the fallen walls of Jerusalem. So, if you are committed to building or rebuilding the kind of life and character that you believe God has created you for, read on. When we first encounter Nehemiah, he is in exile in the land of Persia. He is among the group of Jews who stayed behind when the first and second groups of exiles were released to return home. While still in exile, serving in the king's courts as his cupbearer, he gets a report that the walls of Jerusalem have fallen. The city lies in ruins, and this saddens him. He was so sad about the fallen walls that even as he was doing his work, his shoulders and his countenance were down. The fallen walls, or the city in ruins here, can easily represent our whole lives or certain aspects of our lives, which, when we observe, gives us a great sense of sadness as we are not happy with the condition they are in. This could be your entire life, or you find yourself in a situation where, when you take a closer look, the life you now lead is totally different from the one you believe in your heart you should be living, you should be leading. In other words, the city of your life lies in ruins, and that doesn't feel too good. For some, it is not your whole life, but rather aspects of your life. Perhaps while your career is going well, your relationships are far from satisfactory. For others, the relationships are good, but the finances or the career are not great. Yet for others, the finances, the career, and the family are all good, but your health is not good. Then for others, all personal aspects seem to be in place, but your contribution to society or your spiritual life is far from what you know it should be. In other words, parts of the walls of your life are falling apart, and that too gives you great discomfort. While the preceding paragraph might not spell good news, not all is lost. I strongly believe that the fact that you picked up this book is God, through that discomfort, nudging you in the direction where between you and Him, you can work on rebuilding the city of your life or fixing walls of your life. In other words, I would like to define your discomfort as a holy discomfort. So the question then becomes, what problem or situation in your life that when you think about it, it brings tears to your eyes? That when you think about it, you cannot help but be sad and think of numerous ways to fix it. In other words, what is keeping you awake at night? It does not even need to be happening to you directly, but when you watch it happening, it conjures discomfort and sadness in you. In other words, what is your holy discomfort? Others might feel sad about this, but you feel more. You want to do something. What is that thing for you? That if you were given only 100 days to live, you would be like, I need to do this. I personally have numerous holy discomforts. I cry about the state of education in our country. I do so because I'm a crybaby, yes, but I also do so because I cannot bear to watch the consequences of a poor education system on the life of the African child. I also cry about poverty, maybe because of my own experience. Personally, even as I sit here writing this book, there are certain close relationships in my life where parts of the walls are in ruins and they need to be mended. And if I think too deeply about them, I am often filled with guilt and sometimes shame. Either way, such areas need rebuilding, and God has given me no peace about them. And so I must rebuild. Nehemiah is so sad that even the king can see it. He asks him what is the matter. And Nehemiah requests permission to go and rebuild the fallen walls of his home, the city of Jerusalem. From then on, we witness God opening doors of opportunity to assist Nehemiah on his journey and with the necessary tools and materials to rebuild the walls. When I read this, I got really excited. This said to me, that discomfort in your spirit and in your heart is God nudging you to work towards fixing it. The even better news is that you will not be alone in the process of rebuilding or building your life, as He who has called you to rebuild has already made the necessary provision and favor and made available to you all the tools and grace that you will need to rebuild your life. But you will not know this until you go beyond being uncomfortable and talking about it, and beyond even deciding to build or rebuild. You will only experience the favor that is in place and the materials and tools that are available when you take the necessary action. So, what are you waiting for? All that Nehemiah did in response to the God planted holy discomfort was take action, and God started working. First, God allowed the relevant person, the king of Persia, to see the discomfort and gave Nehemiah courage to express himself and to request the necessary permission to go. God had already started working with the king to ensure that when Nehemiah does indeed raise the matter with him, the king will deal with him favorably. And he did. This leads me to the question of who it is that you talk to about your holy discomfort. I strongly believe that all of us have this holy discomfort about the kind of life that we are living, our contribution in the world, and we have an idea of the kind of life that we want to live. But in most cases, we stop at only talking to our friends about it and never really do anything about it. While it is nice to gather with your friends at dinner or wherever it is that you gather and talk and criticize and dream, if we stop only at talking to our friends who have no power to change our situation or encourage us to change our situation, we'll never get started on the journey of building or rebuilding our lives. I am by no means saying that we must not talk and share our frustrations and dreams. But if that is all that we do, we are simply blowing out hot air. We will get a momentary release, but at the end of the day, we will go back to that same life in which all we do is complain. Yes, speak, but also be sure to speak to the relevant people from whom you can get help and get started on the project of rebuilding your life. But first and foremost, speak to God. The king of Persia had the power to act on Nehemiah's holy discomfort. Moved by the invisible hand that moves the world, the king doesn't just say, okay, you are free to go and rebuild. He provides him with some of the materials that he needs. In addition, he instructs certain people to assist Nehemiah with the additional requirements, tells him which towns to go through and who will provide him with what in those towns. And that is what I'm talking about, my friend. God has lined up people and all the necessary resources for us to build the kind of life that he also desires for us. Sadly, some of us may never fully experience that life, but because we never go beyond the place of talking about it with our friends over a cup of tea, i.e., we never take the necessary action. So, Nehemiah, after taking the first step of speaking to the king, finds favor with the king, and the rest is history. This is a point I want to sit on for a moment. Favor, God's favor. Nehemiah finds favor with the king. He gets given what he needs. He gets provision and protection for the road. He is even given a letter, some form of a pass, which when he shows to the relevant people on his journey home, they will give him what he needs. Now, God's favor, my friend, knows no boundaries. God gave Nehemiah favor, even with his detractors, his haters, who found themselves instructed through the letter from the king to give him what Nehemiah needed. Even though they hated his guts, they gave him what he needed. Now, before you start rightfully celebrating God's favor, my friend, let me hasten and say the minute you find favor with God, and God's favor often comes through people, but the minute you find favor, expect challenges, expect problems, expect opposition, expect to be hated, expect difficulties. No sooner do you find favor that the devil raises people who will oppose you. Yes, favor means some look favorably at you, but there is something about God's favor in your life that conjures up hatred in other people. So, before we continue and talk about building and rebuilding and everything that awaits you there, let us delve deep into the subject of favor, God's favor, often termed grace.